They used to call themselves the lions of the desert. They moved with the arrogance of men who believed the red earth of the Sahel belonged only to those who held the sharpest blade and the darkest intent. But today, the wind has changed. Today, the desert does not echo with their war cries, but with their pleas. In a paradox that would be comical if it were not so revealing, the very groups that once tore up the rule of law are now clutching at the hem of the international community. They are recording videos, not of conquests, but of complaints. They are calling upon the United Nations. They are whispering to Human Rights Watch. They are begging their international partners to save them from the very nation they sought to dismantle. It is a raw, undeniable truth. The grip of terror is thinning, and the hunters have become the hunted. For decades, Mali was spoken of in the past tense, a beautiful history buried under a chaotic present. The world saw a nation that could not defend its own borders, a people reliant on foreign boots and external benevolence. We were told that without the oversight of the old masters, the light would surely go out. But look closely at the dust roads of Kidal today. Listen to the hum in the sky. The Malian armed forces have not just accelerated their strikes, they have transformed the very nature of the conflict. This is not the stumbling militia of yesterday. This is a modern, professionalized force using the silent wings of technology to reclaim every inch of their ancestral home. The intensification is becoming unbearable for those who thought they were untouchable. Stay with us. This is more than a headline. It is a hinge in history. If this story resonates with your sense of justice, show your support with a like, a comment, or a subscription. It means more than numbers. It keeps the story of African dignity alive and ensures these narratives reach every corner of the globe. The narrative being spun in the digital shadows is one of desperation. You have seen the propaganda, the grainy videos claiming that the strikes in Kidal are targeting the innocent. But the eye in the sky does not lie. The drone footage reveals a different reality, a surgical removal of a cancer that has plagued the Sahel for far too long. When the Malian forces strike Adel Hawk, or the districts of Anafis, they are not just hitting targets. They are striking a blow for the sovereignty of a continent. The terrorists no longer have control in Kidal. They no longer dictate the rhythm of life in the north. Their authority has evaporated like mist under the rising sun of a new African era. This shift has forced the hand of the destabilizers. They are now using what we call soft targeting, attacking the spirit because they can no longer hold the ground. They want to manufacture dissent. They want to pressure the civilian population into turning against the very soldiers who wear the national flag on their shoulders. It is a classic tactic, a Western-style blueprint of destabilization meant to create confusion among the Tuareg, the Arab, the Fulani, and the Songhai. They want to turn Mali into a cautionary tale, a fragmented ghost of a country like Somalia. But they have forgotten one thing. The Malian spirit is not a candle to be blown out. It is a fire that has been tempered by centuries of resistance. The silence of the world's media on these victories is deafening. They will tell you about the failures, but they will not tell you about the pride of a soldier standing guard in a region once deemed lost. They will not tell you about the return of the administration to places where the national anthem hadn't been heard in a generation. They focus on the putschists, ignoring the fact that what we are witnessing is the birth pangs of a true independence. This is the Africa rising that the world feared, one that does not ask for permission to exist. This is the pulse of the African diaspora, watching from across the Atlantic, seeing the echoes of their own struggle for justice reflected in the red dust of the Sahel. We are entering the dying phase of the old propaganda. The era of information being filtered through a colonial lens is coming to an abrupt end. As the Malian government bans the channels that served as the mouthpieces of foreign interests, a new media sovereignty is taking root. For the first time, the story is being told by the people who live it. But as the terrorists retreat, as they flee the superior firepower of a nation reborn, they are seeking refuge in the shadows of the past. Intelligence reports have begun to whisper a chilling detail. As the Malian infantry, supported by their air vectors, move to secure the borders, they have discovered that the retreating groups are not disappearing into the dunes. Instead, they are taking shelter in the hollowed-out husks of former French military bases. In the region of Labzina, where the earth meets the sky in a haze of heat, the enemy has found a familiar sanctuary. It raises a question that should haunt every capital from Paris to Washington. Was the withdrawal truly a departure, or was it merely a handoff? The stage is set for a confrontation that goes far beyond a local insurgency. Imagine the silence of a desert morning broken not by the call to prayer, but by the stutter of heavy lead against the mud brick walls of Kidal. For the people of northern Mali, the 25th of April, 2026, was not just another date on a calendar. It was a day when the veil of security was violently torn aside. While the world's cameras were pointed elsewhere, a silent drama was unfolding in the living rooms of those who serve the state. One of those men was Mahmedi A. Al-Baka, the director of the regional ORTM station. He is a man whose voice had long been a lighthouse in the shifting sands of the north, and for that crime of truth-telling, he was marked for elimination. The gunfire began at dawn. By midday, the streets were haunted by those who claimed to represent the desert, but only bring the dust of destruction. At 4 in the afternoon, the war came to Al-Baka's front door. They did not knock. They broke through the walls. In front of his weeping children, a man of peace was taken by men of iron. Imagine the weight of that moment, the heat of the sun, the cries of a family, and the cold realization that your life is now a pawn in a game of global shadows. He was taken to an abandoned social housing market, a place built for hope that had become a chamber for interrogation. They offered him a glass of water, not as an act of mercy, but as a psychological barb. "Don't make it out of the wood," they told him, "because it will be your last drink." This is the reality of the struggle for Sahel geopolitical sovereignty. It is not found in the air-conditioned rooms of international summits. It is found in the courage of a father who refuses to break when the last candle of hope seems to flicker. But Al-Baka's story did not end in a shallow grave. Through the grace of the divine and the resourcefulness of a community that refuses to be silenced, he escaped. His journey took him through the searing heat of the borderlands, into Algeria, down into Niger, and finally back to the heartbeat of Bamako. He arrived exhausted, but his spirit was unyielding. His testimony is a dagger in the heart of the propaganda being fed to the West. The media will tell you that Kidal has fallen. They will tell you that the Malian state has retreated. But Al-Baka tells a different story. He tells of a military that is not defeated, but strategically positioned. While the headlines scream of rebel control, the Malian defense and security forces hold strategic pockets that the enemy cannot touch. From the Adel Hawk district, 150 kilometers from the city, to Anafis, just over 100 kilometers away, the presence of the state is a growing tide. The military has mobilized 12,000 fighters, not just to hold a city, but to protect a nation. This is the facts first reality that the mainstream narrative tries to obscure. They want you to believe in the chaos because chaos justifies intervention. They want you to believe the Malian army is targeting civilians, yet they remain silent when the terrorists use those same civilians as human shields. This is where the mask slips. The groups operating in the north are no longer just local separatists with a grievance. They have become an international brigade of destabilisation, pulling in fighters from across the borders of Chad, Sudan, and beyond. This is not a civil war. It is a planned assault on the very idea of a sovereign Mali. The evidence is there in the coordinated attacks on Kadi, Sévère and Gao, strikes designed to pin down reinforcements and bleed the military dry. It was even there in the cowardly attack against the Minister of Defense, an attempt to decapitate the institution that stands as the last line of defense for the people. And yet, despite the pressure, despite the soft targeting of schools and markets, the resilience of the Malian people remains the greatest obstacle to this imperialist agenda. They have seen this play before. They know that when the enemy starts calling for Human Rights Watch and United Nations intervention, it is because they have lost the ability to win on the battlefield. It is a cynical maneuver. Use violence to seize power, then use the language of international law to protect that power from the consequences of justice. It is a script written in foreign capitals, but the actors are finally forgetting their lines. The question we must ask is why? Why is there such a desperate, well-funded effort to ensure Kidal remains a fracture in the heart of the Sahel? Why does the media campaign against the Malian state reach such a fever pitch exactly when the army begins to show its true strength? The answer lies beneath the sand, in the riches that the lions of the desert are being paid to guard for masters they will never meet. The minerals, the gas, the future of a continent's energy, it is all tied to the fate of these strategic pockets. But as the Malian forces intensify their strikes, as the drones identify the hideouts with cold mathematical precision, the lions are finding that the desert is no longer a hiding place. The very bases they once thought were safe havens, the remnants of a bygone colonial era, are now becoming their prisons. The tide is turning. And the world is starting to realize that the red earth of Mali does not belong to the highest bidder. It belongs to those who are willing to bleed for it. Yet, as we look at the victories on the ground, a new shadow is emerging from the south. Even as the military secures the north, a different kind of war is being waged in the halls of diplomacy. A young leader in Europe is preparing to land in Kenya, ready to unveil a new strategy that claims to respect African borders while quietly seeking to redraw the lines of influence. The battlefield is shifting from the dunes of Kidal to the summits of Nairobi, and the stakes have never been higher. The dust of Kidal is a world away from the manicured lawns and gilded halls of Nairobi. On the 10th of May, 2026, the air in the Kenyan capital was thick with the scent of innovation and the heavy perfume of high-level diplomacy. This was the opening of the Africa Forward Summit 2026, a stage carefully constructed to showcase a new chapter of engagement. As the aircraft carrying the French president touched down, the cameras were ready to capture a moment of supposed transformation. Emmanuel Macron walked onto the podium not as a retreating leader, but as an architect of a balanced partnership. He spoke of an era that ended in 2017, claiming that the days of the private preserve, the infamous France-Afrique, were long dead. He spoke to an audience of entrepreneurs and artists, framing the Macron Nairobi Africa Strategy as a bold move beyond the colonial ghosts of the past. But before we reveal the next chapter, which is perhaps the most powerful assertion of sovereignty you will ever hear, I want to pause and speak directly to you. If this channel has moved you, if these stories are touching something deep in your spirit, then consider becoming a member. Not for exclusive content or perks, but because supporting this channel is directly supporting narratives that mainstream media refuses to tell. Every membership is a vote for the Sahel Doctrine's mission. Every member becomes a co-creator of the revolution we are documenting. Join us. Stand with the principle that African wealth belongs to Africa. In Nairobi, the rhetoric was polished. Macron praised the successes in Benin, the security results in Nigeria, and the cultural reconstructions in Gabon. He painted a picture of a continent that is the youngest, the fastest growing, a demographic dividend waiting to be cashed. It sounded progressive. It sounded like respect. But the silence in the room was louder than the applause. 3 specific nations were absent from this balanced conversation: Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. To the French president, these were the nations that had distanced themselves from the club, the ones who chose the wrong decision by demanding his troops leave. He paid tribute to the French soldiers who fell between 2013 and 2020, his voice heavy with the solemnity of sacrifice. Yet, as he spoke of French blood spilled on African soil, he seemed to have suffered a convenient bout of historical amnesia. He forgot the 55,000 African souls who crossed the Mediterranean to save France from the iron grip of Nazi Germany. He forgot the soldiers from the Sahel who fought for a sovereignty they were never allowed to taste themselves. And most bitterly, he forgot Traore in 1944, the moment when those same heroes, returning home to demand their rightful pay, were met not with gratitude but with the cold lead of French rifles. Where is the monument for them in Nairobi? Where is the balanced partnership for the debt that has never been settled? This is the central paradox of the Africa Forward Summit 2026. While the West speaks of diversifying alliances in English-speaking Kenya, it is only because they have been evicted from the French-speaking heartlands of the Sahel. They call it a choice to leave. The red earth of Mali calls it a victory of will. Macron insists that France no longer makes or unmakes governments. Yet he stands surrounded by old leaders who dance to a young man's tune, while the young lions of the Sahel, leaders like Ibrahim Traore, are treated as pariahs for simply standing their ground. The narrative in Nairobi was about Africa as a whole, yet it carefully excluded the very heart of the continent's awakening. This is the Sahel Geopolitical Sovereignty that the world's cameras refuse to focus on. It is a sovereignty that is being negotiated not with pens and champagne, but on the battlefield and in the hearts of a people who have finally said no more. Macron claims that French companies have lost market share because Africa is now competitive, but the reality is simpler. Africa is becoming self-aware. The people have realized that the guaranteed insurance France offered was only an insurance policy for the continued extraction of their wealth. While the politicians in Kenya discuss demographic dividends, the people of the Sahel are discussing the dividends of their own soil. They have seen the masks fall. They have seen the human rights groups remain silent when imperial interests were at stake, only to find their voices the moment a sovereign African army begins to win. The contrast is jarring. In Nairobi, the talk is of security relationships that do not yet exist. In the Sahel, the people are busy building a security that actually works, one that doesn't require a foreign master to give the order. But the most chilling part of the speech in Nairobi wasn't what was said about the military. It was the subtle admission of what lies beneath the economic partnership. For even as the sun set over the Kenyan skyline, back in the dark corners of the Taudeni Basin, the whispers of a different kind of profit were growing louder. The talk of culture and sports is the velvet glove. The iron fist remains tightly clenched around the minerals of the future. And as we dig deeper into the documents and the setbacks of foreign firms, we find that the chaos in Kidal might not be a failure of policy at all. It might be the plan itself. Behind the tactical maps and the hum of drone propellers lies a far more profound engine: the human spirit. It is easy to speak of strategic pockets and military vectors, but what truly sustains the Malian advance in Kidal is the character of the African soldier, the young man who has traded his youth for a chance at true independence. These are not the faceless mercenaries of a bygone era. These are sons of the soil, driven by a motivation that no foreign paycheck can replicate. While the opposition relies on a patchwork of international fighters and local grievances, the Malian forces are unified by a singular burning vision of dignity. This is the price to pay for sovereignty, a currency minted in sacrifice and late-night vigils on the edge of the desert. This awakening is not limited to the front lines. It is a system-wide shift. For decades, the Sahel was viewed as a playground for extraction, a place where chaos was not a failure of the system, but its primary feature. We must look at the Taudeni Basin, not just as a geographical feature, but as a vault. Within its depths lie some of the world's most significant reserves of natural gas and lithium, the white gold of the 21st century. History tells us that wherever such wealth is found, a specific type of darkness follows. We have seen it in the documents of companies like Okla Mining, the chilling strategy of creating instability to lower the cost of mining rights. When a nation is in flames, its resources are sold for a pittance. The restoration of order in Kidal is therefore more than a military victory. It is an economic liberation. It is the closure of the chaos loop that has kept the continent in a state of perpetual debt. Pause for a moment and share with us where you are watching this video. Is it from the bustling streets of Atlanta, the quiet suburbs of London, the vibrant markets of Lagos, or a small village whose name deserves to be spoken aloud? Tell us in the comments, because every place matters, and your presence here connects the dots of our global family. The Sahel Doctrine wants to thank you personally for being part of this journey and to send a heartfelt wish across the distance. May freedom and dignity walk beside you, and may your own path be illuminated by hope and strength wherever you are. Let these comments be not just words, but bridges of solidarity that span the oceans. For our elders in the African diaspora, this story feels familiar. It is the same rhythm of resistance that defined the civil rights movements in the United States and the anti-apartheid struggles in the South. It is the understanding that freedom is never given. It is asserted. When the Macron Nairobi Africa Strategy was unveiled at the Africa Forward Summit 2026, it was presented as a gift, a new way of doing business. But the people of Mali, led by the spirit of figures like Ibrahim Traore, are no longer interested in gifts. They are interested in ownership. They have seen how aid can become a tether and how partnerships can become a polite word for tutelage. This is Black history in the making, a chapter being written in real time, proving that the continent is no longer a silent observer of its own exploitation. The system of destabilisation is sophisticated. It uses the media to paint the defender as the aggressor and uses economic pressure to starve the defiant. But the young captains of the Sahel have cracked the code. They have realized that if you control the security of your land, you control its future. The Sahel Geopolitical Sovereignty we discuss is the practical application of this realization. It is the refusal to be the Somalia of West Africa. It is the choice to build a wall of unity that the winds of foreign interest cannot blow down. The price of this path is high. It involves international sanctions, media blackouts, and the constant threat of soft targeting. But to the people of Bamako and Kidal, it is a price worth paying to ensure their children do not grow up as tenants in their own home. We are seeing a generation that is standing on business, as the saying goes. They are not negotiating their territorial integrity for a seat at a table that was never meant for them. They are building their own table. This shift is what makes the old empires nervous. It isn't just about Mali, it's about the precedent. If Mali can secure its borders, if Burkina Faso can feed its people, if Niger can dictate the price of its uranium, then the entire structure of the post-colonial world begins to tilt. The lions of the desert that the West tried to cultivate have been outmaneuvered by the lions of the state, and the roar of this new Africa is being heard from the Taodeni Basin all the way to the streets of New York. Yet, as the military secures the strategic pockets and the diplomats navigate the traps of Nairobi, one final battle remains. It is the battle for the mind, the struggle to ensure that the pride being felt today is not a fleeting emotion, but a permanent foundation. The enemy knows that if they cannot break the soldier, they must try to break the citizen. They are waiting for the fatigue to set in, for the hope to dim, for the silence to return. But they have underestimated the depth of this awakening. They have underestimated the power of a people who have finally remembered who they are. The era of the puppet show is closing. For too long, the narrative of the Sahel was a script written in foreign ink, performed by actors who looked like us but spoke for them. But as the infantry of Mali secures the final strategic pockets of Kidal, and as the drones of the Federation patrol the borders of our dignity, that script has been torn to shreds. We are witnessing the death of the Western propaganda machine in West Africa. It is a slow, grinding collapse, but it is irreversible. The decision to ban the biased channels, the voices that whispered fear and manufactured dissent, was not an act of censorship. It was an act of media sovereignty. It was the reclamation of the African mind. This awakening is the true nightmare of the old empires. They can deal with a military coup. They have done so for decades. They can deal with a protest. They have tear gas for that. But they cannot deal with a people who have reclaimed their own story. When you look at the events surrounding the Africa Forward Summit 2026, the contrast is stark. On one side, you have the polished, diplomatic theater of the Macron Nairobi Africa Strategy, trying to salvage what remains of a crumbling influence by speaking of partnership while excluding the very heart of the resistance. On the other side, you have the red earth of the Sahel, where sovereignty is not a talking point, but a lived reality. The struggle we see in Mali, led by the vision of figures like Ibrahim Traore, is the pulse of a continent that has decided to stop waiting for permission to be great. It is a message that resonates deeply with the African diaspora, from the streets of Harlem to the shores of Brazil. It is a reminder that our history did not begin with the chain, and it will not end with the debt. Black history is being forged right now in the furnace of the Sahel, proving that the Africa Rising narrative is not a corporate slogan, but a revolutionary truth. We are seeing the last candle in Kidal not as a flickering hope, but as the spark that has ignited a wildfire of pride across the entire global South. What you have witnessed today is not a conclusion, but an opening. Africa's story of pride and independence is still being written, and each voice that joins makes the chorus stronger. Subscribe now to the Sahel Doctrine, not as a favor, but as a commitment to follow this journey into the light. Because the next chapter will not just continue the story, it may reshape how you see the entire world. We are building a sanctuary for the truth here, a place where the drum of sovereignty beats without apology. Do not let this moment pass into silence. Subscribe and stand ready for the chapter that comes after this one, for the road ahead is long, but we walk it together. As we wrap up this exploration, we must look at the Africa Forward Summit 2026 as a symbol of the old world's attempt to catch up with a continent that has already moved on. The lions they tried to tame have found their own pride. The soft targeting of our spirits has only made us harder. The chaos they tried to manufacture has only unified our resolve. The Sahel Geopolitical Sovereignty is the foundation upon which the new Africa is being built. A home where the resources belong to the children of the soil, and where the national anthem is a song of true, unadulterated freedom. The journey from the gunfire of Kidal to the halls of Nairobi tells us one thing: the sun is rising, and the shadows of the past are growing short. The debt of 1944 is being remembered, the wealth of the Taodeni Basin is being guarded, and the spirit of the ancestors is being honored in every strike against those who seek to keep us small. We are no longer the Somalia of West Africa. We are the beacon of a new world order. The red earth is ours, the future is ours, and the last candle has become a sun that will never set.